Welcome back to the channel, everyone. My name's Joe Buskins. This is our family's boat shop. Today's episode is all about sanding. And if you've done any kind of boat work or gonna do any kind of boat work, sanding is gonna be part of the process. I can almost guarantee it. And I've had some requests for this video, so I'm excited to present it for you folks. Now, if you're new to the channel, we got well over 100 videos, everything from documenting the build of our 29 footer in the background to more recently, we built a plug, a mold, and a complete custom hardtop for our 29, which you're currently using for a table right now for some of our supplies that we set up for our videos. But behind me, I've got a table full of kind of what you would just call a kit, if you will. Now, honestly, if you're just getting into this, you don't need everything we have on this table, but if you're doing it professionally like we do it, over the years, you're gonna accumulate a lot of different tools. And what I thought I would do is just do a basic overview first of just sandpaper and abrasives, and then I've got some air tools or pneumatics, and I got an assortment of electric tools, even just your good old-fashioned hand tools where you're blocking and fairing. So something for every price point and range, and if you want to use air power or electric. And then over here, I've got a little table set up with a surface that we can sand and something we drilled a hole through that I'm going to show you some tools for that, and even a piece of 2-pound density flotation foam that we poured in just one of our previous episodes, and we're going to use it to even show how the material sands. So first off, what we're going to do is look at the selection of sandpaper that we have here on a table, and you'll notice most of these sandpaper boxes are going to show how many pieces, and you'll see a number like 40. G stands for grit. We've got 60 grit, 80 grit, 120, 220, 400, 600, 800, and then 1200. Now, honestly, for a shop like mine, those are going to be your most popular grits for sanding. Generally, the lower the number, the more aggressive the grit. So for even example, the most aggressive we might ever use would be a 24 grit. And you can see that is incredibly coarse. That would be for heavy grinding. We use a lot of the 36 grit for all around material removal, and you can see a difference in the texture just in those two pieces. Now, I know we've got a lot of guys out there that are pros at this, and some of this stuff's gonna seem pretty basic, but hang in there with me. Maybe you'll pick up some little tips and pointers or some things you haven't thought of, or maybe something I've learned here in the shop that you haven't seen before. But for all you DIYers out there, this is fundamental knowledge. If you're gonna be replacing a transom floor stringer, again, you're gonna be doing some sanding, and the heavy stuff, these grinder discs are gonna be really, really good for heavy material removal. Now, everything else in between kind of has its place, but on the opposite end of the spectrum, you have some 1200 here, and that is almost smooth to the touch. That would be for most of our gel coat finishing and polishing. And matter of fact, we just recently did a 3-part video where we faired out a panel, applied some gel coat by spraying, and then we did a full spectrum of wet sanding and polishing to bring it to a shine. And 1200 is typically on the top end of where we finish at, and usually somewhere around 400 is where we start. So there's always kind of a range of tools in there. Now, when I talked about sanding, one of the most popular tools on the table, this is my Hutchins. That's a 6-inch DA sander or a dual action. I've had this tool forever, and this is a fantastic piece of equipment. They're not cheap, but I've got probably over 25 years of use on this air tool, and it is fantastic. Doesn't take a giant compressor to run, and will readily take material down. Now, that is some 80 grit. That's 3M paper that we're using there. And 80 grit is a very good all-around grit. It's probably one of those, like, if you're gonna try to be like, well, goodness, I don't need all of this paper here, 80 grit is one that I use an awful lot for just all around. It's kind of in the middle of the pack when it comes to material removal. Now, we've got another air tool or another electric tool here. This is a Bosch. That is a variable speed. You can see we can change the speed of this up or down. And I actually made a custom disc here. I took a Velcro 7-inch arbor and trimmed it down so that a 6-inch pad and that is a 40 grit. More aggressive grit. This one doesn't orbit, it just spins. And as we bring the speed up, that thing is a machine when it comes to heavy fairing material removal. If you want something that's going to get a good flat surface and remove material rapidly, that is actually one of my very favorites. Now, we also have a little high-speed grinder over here. And if I were just getting into boat work, that's a little DeWalt. It's they call it a 4.5 inch, and you're going to need a 4.5 inch arbor there for the back of this thing, a backing pad. And we will be linking all that stuff. We've gone to Amazon and we tried really hard to find exactly what I'm using here. So for y'all's convenience, if you go to the video's description and click on it, and then just below that, you're going to see an assortment of the products that we use. Now, I have had some comments from folks that are new to using these. A lot of the time when you're a pro and you do this, these machines will come with a guard such as, and that goes on the back side and helps keep your fingers out of that grinder. But when you do this all the time, you kind of learn to work around that. But I would recommend most of you folks, if you're just learning, leave that guard in place until you get very comfortable with, or maybe even never take it off. But the reason we take it off is a lot of times we are trying to sand with the disc completely flat on a surface, and the guard will not allow us to do that. So a lot of times we'll remove it. Now, not a bad idea to wear some heavy duty rubber gloves if you're going to be doing that. And we're going to remove, I want to show you with some 36 grit how rapidly this one gets in. Now, a couple of other little tools that come in super handy is your little DeWalt orbital. Now, again, using some 80 grit on that, and you may use this little tool after one of the heavier grinders to remove. You can see what an aggressive grinder mark that 36 grit left. The 80, you can see just how quickly we corrected that and made things look really, really nice. Now, we've got a safety video that we've done talking about PPE. If you're just making dust like this, a dust mask like this one is totally fine, and some air protection is totally, or eye protection is totally fine. Now, one of our other big tools, a lot of people don't know this, but you can use your big DeWalt buffer. That's the DW849. Y'all have seen this in a bunch of our videos, and that is a 7-inch universal backing pad. And again, we'll try really hard to link some of this stuff below the video's description. And again, for large volume and variable speed, that is a dual purpose, just like the Bosch is. You can certainly get a lot of work done. Now, when we are building, like say for example, a mold, and you need to really fair out the surface, it needs to be long and straight. We call this a long board or a long block, and this is made by 3M. It's very lightweight, yet it's very rigid. And if you're shaping over a long straight panel, you can really run a big board like this back and forth and get a really nice true surface. Now, I've had a lot of questions. Yes, they do make specific strips of paper, but a lot of times in my shop I found that the circular discs work just fine, and it gives me kind of one material that'll work with almost everything I have in the shop. Now, you could certainly get again, the ones that are custom made for these are all Velcro backed, which I prefer the Velcro personally over the glue back or the sticky back ones, because when you have a wet sanded surface, the glued ones will not stick well to a disc or a pad that's got moisture on it. But the Velcro, you can get that soaking wet and they still will pop off of there and pop back on, no problem. But this one, again, is a rigid one. If you have a sailboat, for example, and you have curves and contours, 3M also makes these flexible blocking pads. Same deal, we're just using some 80 grit on this one. Of course, you could use any grit you want. Just remember, the smaller the number, the more aggressive the grit. And generally from about 40 grit up to about 1200 grit are going to be the grits that we keep in our shop on a day-to-day basis. Now again, smaller jobs, the little 3M blocks. Remember, everybody should own, anybody that's doing this kind of work and watching the channel, these are fairly inexpensive, super handy. Again, Velcro back, those are 40 grit. 40's really good for just good heavy material removal, just kind of all around use there. Now, one of my favorite other air tools, this is a big Hutchins Pneumatic. Hutchins is the same company that makes that air tool right there. And these are amazing power tools. Hutchins doesn't sponsor me. They don't send me these tools for free. I pay for them with my own money. But I've had them for years and they have been really, really good to me. Same deal for long, flat panels. You can really fare out a long, flat panel. So we're gonna try really hard to jam a lot of information in here, and hopefully if you guys see something in here that's interesting to you, you can always comment and I'll try my best to answer those comments. Now is also a good time to ask you folks, if you're enjoying the videos and want to help support the channel and you haven't already subscribed, like, shared, comment. If there's other forums or pages that you guys spend time on, getting the word out to the channel, the more the channel grows, the more we can do this. And if you guys need any of the supplies we're using, the Amazon links below, that also does help support the channel, and it's convenient for you folks at home to find what you're using. So on the other end of things, this is something almost everybody at home can do. And what we have here are an assortment of little wood blocks, everything from little bitty. Matter of fact, if you go to our Gelcoat Masterclass video, you can see us using these little tiny wood blocks. And if you were to have a real small gel coating, you would actually just wrap this in some wet or dry sandpaper, and you can actually just cut it to size. A lot of times we would measure this on the block, cut off a strip, and you basically would just roll it on there. Matter of fact, I even took, sometimes a little stirring stick can make a good sanding block. I usually lay it right on the edge. Just roll it up just like so. And you can use a little block like this if you had some fairing or shaping to do. Now you will notice I've got a full assortment all the way from little bitty tiny ones, using my hand as a reference. You got a full assortment. This one's even a foam block that has some flexibility. And these are also a soft foam that occasionally I will wrap these in wet or dry sandpaper when we're doing real fine detail on some of our gel coat repair. Now again, gel coat repair seems to be a very popular topic, and we have several videos here on the channel with several different boats and several different methods for doing gel coat repair. Another thing that you can make at home that's fairly inexpensive, a piece of PVC pipe, and you can just take a disc and wrap it around there. Now you may wonder, what is the use for that? So I'm gonna gather up a couple tools. Y'all come over here and check this out. If you are doing some kind of like stringer or transom repair and you want to run some rigging through a stringer, you may find yourself drilling a hole through the stringer and you want to clean that edge up. Real easy to take a piece of PVC pipe. I like to hold my finger where it overlaps. It's real easy to get in there. That can also work really nice. For example, if you're drilling a hole and you have a hole saw that's not quite big enough for whatever you're trying to fit in there, you can kind of fine tune it. Sometimes you just need a little more material and that PVC pipe will do the job. Now, a couple other things you may not think of. We call this a rasp, and this is a rat tail file and a rasp. These are also very good at cleaning out. You need to open up. Matter of fact, on this piece of foam here, you can see how rapidly you can contour and shape things amazingly. Same deal with this one. This is a little less aggressive. That one is very aggressive. And these are inexpensive tools that you can put in your kit that anybody starting out with fiberglass repair, I would recommend putting a couple of those. Now, another fairly inexpensive little tool, an air tool. It's a pneumatic. You do need a compressor to run this, but you don't need a very big compressor at all. This has a carbide burr, and again, very good for opening up areas or little fine detail, like down in little corners and whatnot. Sometimes you need to get that little burr. Now, one thing you can do, I bought these at Harbor Freight, but I'm sure you can go online. They've got different burrs and bits that you can get that will fit inside of that little die grinder. That's a little DeWalt, but there's a variety. And again, I'll put some links below the video. Another inexpensive little air tool is this little 90-degree die grinder. Now, what's cool about this one? This one has a little teeny row-lock disc. These are the disc you're going to be looking for. They are super handy if you were doing any kind of, that's a 80 grit on that one. And these are kind of cool. They just spin on and spin off this little disc. Just like so. So when one's worn out, you can spin it off. And you might be surprised at how well that is surprisingly powerful and effective, again, for smaller detail stuff, but it can get in those little tight corners and spots that a bigger power tool may not be able to get into. Now, there's a couple other really cool techniques that I wanted to show you folks. A lot of times we'll use these paint scrapers when we're working with anything like epoxy especially, but you folks will notice down here on our sample panel, we've got some body filler and we've got some ridges that are showing up. You can use one of these scrapers and scrape some of that material off of the panel. Now, the material we have on here is very comparable. You guys seen in some of my earlier videos, we used a lot of the Napa Pro Strand. It's a short strand fiberglass reinforced polyester filler, but Everglass makes a short strand fiberglass reinforced filler that is very good. I like it a lot, and I've been using it, and that's what you're looking at there. It's got a little hardener that should go with that, and you can do all kind of good repair jobs. Real good for doing fillets or fillets, like in corners, radiusing, transitioning, that kind of thing. Now, one other, again, very inexpensive, and you would not think of it necessarily as being something you're going to need in a repair shop or repair situation, but some razor blades. Now, we've already done quite a bit of sanding down here, but a lot of times, like for example on this little ridge right there, you can take there you go. You'd be surprised again at how effective a razor blade can be. Sometimes if you have a little drip or a run in some of your repair work, or if you're doing some gel coat filling and say you've brushed it in there and you've got some ridges. And again, in some of our gel coat repair videos, you can see me using that technique. So obviously it's taking me a while to accumulate all of these tools, but if I had to pick just a few to start with, a dual action or a DA sander is really, really helpful. Now the Hutchins, fairly expensive and you need a compressor, but to me, they're worth the money. But the cheaper alternative, and I try to always show some less expensive alternatives for you folks at home. If you're only doing one little job and don't even know if you want to do more of this, no point spending a ton of money. These little DeWalt variable speed electrics, and you can just use the same. I actually use the bigger pads on these, and a lot of times when you get into corners, it's kind of forgiving. It will wrinkle up on the edges and minimize the chances of you kind of digging a gouge as you move in to those corners. For any kind of heavy duty stuff, the high speed grinder, the little 4.5 inch, and you're gonna need a 4.5 inch backer for this one and a low profile nut. But again, I will show those there in the video descriptions. And then as far as an assortment of sandpaper, I really like 40 and 80 for like heavier material removal. I really like 220 and 120 kind of in the middle of the pack. And then we use a lot of 400 and 600 when it comes to more of the finer finish and polish. And then 1200 is typically as far as we go on lighter color gel coats. Now, if you have a much newer boat and it's a dark gel coat color, you can move on up to 1500, 2000, and so on. Just remember, the higher the number, the finer the grit is going to be. So I think I have covered everything. That was a lot of stuff to go over, and forgive me if I missed anything. If you see anything on the table you're really interested in, you can always leave a comment and I will do my best to get back to you folks. I am very, very busy, so I try to see the comments, but I can't guarantee that I'll be able to respond to everyone. But again, I want to thank everyone from my heart. I thank you so much for spending the time to check out the channel. It's Captain Joe here, Island Marine Charters, Fish Bump TV, my son Logan as my amazing cameraman working hard behind the scenes. And as always, we will catch you folks next time out.